Hi class, my name is Amelia Rayburn, and tonight my technique demonstration will be a discussion on animal-assisted therapy. And that's a picture of my dog. So we're going to talk a little bit about the neurological response first to animal therapy. So interactions with animals, specifically with dogs, has resulted in neurological shifts that can decrease anxiety and depression symptoms and promote ease and comfort in social interactions. So specifically, the neurological response is an increase in oxytocin that's created when we have positive interactions with specifically dogs, which creates a positive neurological response, such as the suppression of the HPA stress response, the suppression of the heightened amygdala responses, so the stress responses, right? And a decrease in startle reactivity. And these neurological responses can, in turn, work to facilitate better bonding with others. It can help us to increase others, and it can improve social interactions and empathy. Primary responses to interactions with dogs, like those with the amygdala and the HPA, really originated in the primitive brain, the reptilian brain, as van der Kolk would say, which inspired me to think that a prospective population that would benefit are those who have undergone ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, those who have had trauma at an earlier age that affected their brain's development at an earlier age. So some examples of these cases, hey, come here. Some of the examples of these cases are the case of, in Dr. Perry's book, right, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, the case of Laura and Virginia, where Virginia had been placed from family to family throughout her life, and she didn't know the appropriate way to nurture a child, and that children need physical love and touch like that at such an early age. And so, in turn, Laura, her daughter, had failure to thrive, and they didn't really understand what it was. And then Dr. Perry introduced them to Mama P's family, and that physical affection, that love like that, really helped Laura break through. And I considered that a case like that would have benefit from animal therapy as well. Why not? And I'm telling you, I could have sworn one of these cases talked about animal therapy, and then I couldn't find it in the book. Regardless, Connor's case also, where he was left for hours at a time by his nanny, and wasn't held, wasn't talked to, wasn't interacted with. He then later on developed like a fear or an aversion to physical touch, which also caused like some odd social behaviors. So Dr. Perry first started with massage therapy, and I considered that could be like a really intrusive and uncomfortable experience. And so it could be beneficial to begin before you do massage therapy with another person, doing some sort of massage therapy or interactions with physical touch with an animal. So animal assisted therapy. So here is just, I wanted to share some anecdotal evidence about animal assisted therapy. I'm trying to figure out a good place to put the camera. And it's purely anecdotal, as it says up there. In the center where I work, and that is my son in the middle, wouldn't show photos of clients. We instilled some sort of animal therapy activities last year. They were not, certified therapy animals by any means. It was just an organization that brings chick hatching projects to schools. We had them bring it to our children's counseling program to see if nurturing and caring for the eggs, and then nurturing and caring for the young chicks after they hatched could be a good form of animal therapy in a way, at least in the way that we could provide some psychoeducation in a sense of how to nurture, especially because it is a domestic violence center. So they might not have had those things set up for them, much like some cases that we've learned about. And so they were able to practice nurturing and caring in that physical touch and gentle touch and things like that. which I learned later on is an important aspect of animal therapy through this project. Um, this is purely anecdotal, but I just wanted to say that the children, teens, and even the adults that live in our shelter, that come through our center, and that work at our center, all of our moods were improved when those chicks were living in the center. We were happier. We were, um, excited to come to work. We were calmer. There was just a positive, loving energy around the chicks. And I see it in some of our clients too. We have a client who's been through extensive trauma, almost 30 years in an abusive marriage, who um, has taken to feeding and caring for the squirrels and the rabbits that live on our property at the shelter. So it's really interesting to see how animals do come into play in a therapeutic way. But purely anecdotal. I just wanted to share that. So I did an interview with my friend Laura Dushkovitz, who is a handler for a therapy dog. So Freddie is her therapy dog. He is trained through the American Kennel Club, and he has a number of credentials. So he is a credentialed therapy dog, and he comes to our domestic violence shelter. Um, and so I did an interview with Laura, and I spent some time with Freddie in an attempt to do this demonstration for you. So when I thought about the best ways to provide this demonstration, I thought just bringing Freddie in and recording a session of me just spending time with Freddie and talking with Laura would be impactful. Especially because through my research, one of the cool things I found, or maybe not so cool because it would be more beneficial for a demonstration aspect of this, is that it's hard to really define a demonstration or a step-by-step guide to animal-assisted therapy. One study discussed that activities such as grooming, talking to, and/or interacting with an animal might benefit a participant in this method as much as any structured intervention would. So even just merely spending time with, talking to, grooming, taking a dog for a walk, massaging an animal, things like that, can have just as much benefit as a structured intervention would. So one of the studies that I read did have an outlined guide on how to do a 3-session animal-assisted therapy project with children. And what it consisted of was just bringing in each child's therapy dog, and they would stroke and groom the therapy dog. They would give the dog some water. They would take the dog for a walk. And then they would learn how to, and then they'd provide the dog with a sort of calming massage. And then each session devoted time to discussions with the kids and the dogs, centered around the animal. So covering topics like, how would you make your dog happy? How does a dog respond when it's happy? How could you make a dog angry? How would a dog respond when it's angry? So on and so forth. In the final session, the only difference was that the children were assisted in teaching their dog a trick, which is a fun little way to end a session or a 3-session series of animal therapy. So Freddie, the therapy dog, Laura said something very similar to this, that in some of their first sessions, she really just shares his story. So the story about how she came to get Freddie and how she discovered Freddie's talent for therapy and how he then went and sought his credentials and where he goes and what he does. And so she tells his story, much like the children in that series of sessions where they were telling stories about the animals. And it's interesting because in the O'Hare article that I've cited on the last slide here, it outlines that positive outcomes were greater when dogs were meaningfully incorporated into child and adolescent group therapy through stories, more than being merely present. So yes, petting a dog and spending time with a dog can be just as beneficial as a structured session, but even more beneficial is telling stories with that dog, telling your own story or telling a story about that dog, telling, something inspired by that dog, things of that nature. Maybe using that dog as, or personification is not the word, an animal version of yourself, right? Um, I have this friend who, but it's my dog in the session. So that's an example. Um, Laura also discussed that she notices a really positive shift in many of Freddie's clients simply from just spending time with Freddie, loving on him, snuggling him, petting him, kissing him, hugging him. She said that they can hug him and snuggle him and give him physical love and he won't reject them. And that's what she feels is the most important part, is that they know that he won't reject them. And what's really interesting is in Mary Louise Cole's manual, and I use the term manual loosely because even she's the one who says, there is no step-by-step guide, there is no real, structured way of doing animal assisted therapy. But in her manual, she discusses that as an important factor. That dogs are expected to offer clients what is referred to as unconditional acceptance, which is kind of what Laura was talking about with Freddie. Freddie, he's over here on the screen, but over here to me in real life. And in that Freddie doesn't reject these children. It's, rejecting the love and affection and the social interactions. It's helping with that. So, while in my session with Freddie, I settled on telling stories. So I heard Freddie's story, and I shared some of just what I was going through with Laura, but while I was petting Freddie, and it really was beneficial. But what I wanted to ask of you guys is, if you were to do this session, what would you do? What would you do to incorporate an animal into a more traditional practice? One of the demonstration videos that you guys did with an animal incorporated, I know that they do different yoga classes with animals incorporated, puppy yoga, goat yoga I've seen. So there is a way to combine some of these mindfulness and, therapeutic practices, which I think would be cool. What do you guys think? Let's get creative, right? And then here are my citations. Some of these are literature studies, some of these are just regular studies, and then obviously some of our textbooks. But thank you guys so much. I appreciated this. I was supposed to have my dog in here to spend some time, but at least there were some photos of her in there. She's not really participating how I hoped she would. All right. Have a great night.